I always thought the worst thing that could happen to a man was losing his wife. Death, sickness, an accident, things you can't control. But I was wrong. The worst thing isn't losing her. The worst thing is realizing that for 50 goddamn years, she was never really yours. It started with something small. It always does. A detail that doesn't add up, a shadow where there shouldn't be one. If I hadn't noticed it that night, maybe I would have lived the rest of my life in blissful ignorance. Maybe I would have died thinking I had the perfect marriage. Maybe that would have been better. But I did notice. And that's when my entire world began to crack. Mary and I had been together since we were 20. 50 years of marriage, 3 kids, 5 grandchildren. People envied us, called us the perfect couple. And for most of my life, I believed that too. Until that night. She had gone into town that afternoon, nothing unusual. Just a quick errand, she said. When she came back, she was humming a tune I didn't recognize, which was odd because Mary always hummed the same old songs from our youth. She kissed my cheek, told me dinner would be ready soon, and disappeared into our bedroom. That should have been the end of it. I should have gone back to my book, sipped my whiskey, and let it go. But something felt off. Her perfume was stronger than usual, like she had reapplied it before coming inside. And her hands, when she touched my shoulder, they were cold. Not from the weather. From nerves. I sat in my chair, staring at the book in my lap without reading a single word. My gut told me something was wrong. Then I heard it. A small vibration. A phone, buzzing. Not mine. Mary's purse was on the counter, half-zipped. And inside, her phone screen lit up. I don't know why I got up. I don't know why I looked. I had never invaded her privacy before. But something, some force I couldn't name, made me reach out and tilt the screen just enough to read the message. Did you give it to him? My mouth went dry. A second later, another message popped up. Call me later. I miss you already. I stood there, my hands gripping the edge of the counter. My heart was pounding, loud enough to drown out the quiet sounds of Mary moving in the other room. I could have stopped there. Pretended I never saw it. But I didn't. With slow, careful movements, I reached into her purse. My fingers brushed against her wallet, some crumpled receipts, then landed on something small and smooth. A box. I pulled it out. A small, elegant case, the kind jewelry or a watch might come in. My hands felt like lead as I flipped it open. Inside was a men's watch. Expensive. Sleek. The kind I never wore. The kind I sure as hell didn't own. I stared at it for a long time. Longer than I should have. Behind me, I heard the bedroom door open. Mary's voice, casual and light. Everything okay? I snapped the box shut and turned, forcing my face into a neutral mask. Yeah, I said, slipping the watch back into her purse as smoothly as I had taken it. Just thinking. She smiled, the same warm, familiar smile I had known for 50 years. And for the first time in my life, I wondered how many times that smile had been a lie. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those damn messages. Did you give it to him? Call me later. I miss you already. Over and over, like a goddamn broken record. Then the watch. That sleek, expensive piece of metal that didn't belong to me. My wife was cheating on me. The thought alone made my stomach churn, but I wasn't the kind of man to jump to conclusions without proof. Maybe there was some explanation, though deep down, I already knew there wasn't. 50 years of marriage, and I could tell when Mary was lying. The only difference now was that I had proof. I needed more. The next morning, I acted like nothing was wrong. Sat at the breakfast table, sipping my coffee, pretending to read the newspaper while watching Mary out of the corner of my eye. She was the same as always, smiling, talking about the grandkids, asking if I wanted eggs. It made me sick. I looked at the woman I had shared my entire life with and saw a stranger. When she left to run errands, I finally did something I never thought I'd do. I went through her phone. She always kept it locked, but I knew her passcode. It was our wedding anniversary. The irony nearly made me laugh. I opened her messages. Most were ordinary, texts from our kids, friends, grocery lists. Then I found a chat with a number that wasn't saved in her contacts. No name. Just a phone number. I clicked it, and my blood ran cold. I can't stop thinking about last night. You're amazing. When can I see you again? I hate sneaking around, but I love you too much to stop. There were dozens of messages like this. Some short, some long, some graphic. My hands trembled as I scrolled. Weeks. Months. How long had this been going on? Then I found something worse. A picture. It wasn't explicit, but it didn't need to be. Mary was sitting in the passenger seat of a car, smiling at whoever was taking the photo. Her hair was slightly messy, her blouse unbuttoned just enough to tell me that she hadn't been home when this was taken. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was betrayal. I closed the messages, heart pounding. There was only one thing left to do. I went to our closet, grabbed one of Mary's old purses, and pulled out an old phone. One of our kids had given it to her years ago, but she'd barely used it. I turned it on, inserted a spare SIM card I had lying around, and set up a fake number. Then I sent a text to the unknown number. We need to talk. Meet me at the cafe on 5th, noon. I waited, staring at the screen. 5 minutes later, the response came. Of course, baby. Can't wait to see you. Baby. I felt my entire world collapse. I clenched my fists so hard my knuckles turned white. This wasn't just an affair. This was something deeper. Something real. She loved him. But she had no idea that by tonight, everything in her life was about to come crashing down. I sat in my truck across the street from the cafe, my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. The clock on the dashboard read 11:58 a.m. 2 minutes. 2 minutes until I saw the bastard who had been screwing my wife. I had imagined this moment in a dozen different ways. Maybe he'd be some young, cocky guy with a smirk on his face, thinking he had stolen something from an old fool. Maybe he'd be a desperate, pathetic man, clinging to the last bit of excitement in his miserable life. But nothing could have prepared me for what I actually saw. At exactly noon, a sleek black Mercedes pulled up to the curb. The driver's door opened, and out stepped David Carter. I felt the air leave my lungs. David Carter. My best friend. A man I had known for 45 years. A man who had been the best man at my wedding. A man who held my firstborn son in his arms the day he was born. He was the one screwing my wife. My vision went red. My fingers clenched the steering wheel so tight I thought it might snap. Every muscle in my body screamed for me to get out, to rip the door open, to drag him into the street and make him feel every ounce of the betrayal that was burning through my veins. But I didn't move. I forced myself to stay still, to breathe, to think. Because this wasn't just about me anymore. I watched as David smoothed his shirt, checked his reflection in the car window, and walked inside the cafe, completely oblivious. I exhaled slowly, my breath shaky. Not yet. I grabbed my phone and quickly typed out a message. Change of plans. Meet me at the motel on Route 7. Room 214. Now. I pressed send. A few seconds later, I saw him pull his phone out of his pocket, read the message, and smile. He smiled. That smug, satisfied look on his face made my blood boil. He left the cafe, got back in his car, and pulled away. I started my truck and followed. The Route 7 motel was the kind of place that reeked of cheap perfume and broken marriages. I had passed by it 1,000 times, never paying it much attention. Now, I was about to step inside one of its rooms and confront the man who had destroyed my life. David's Mercedes was already parked outside room 214 when I arrived. I pulled into a spot a few cars down and cut the engine. He was sitting in the driver's seat, probably waiting for Mary to text him again. I could see him checking his phone, frowning slightly. He had no idea what was coming. I got out of my truck and walked toward his car. The second he saw me, his expression changed. First confusion, then panic. He scrambled to open his door, but I was already there. I grabbed the handle and yanked it open before he could react. "Going somewhere, Dave?" I asked, my voice calm. Too calm. His eyes darted around, like a rat looking for an escape. "John, this isn't what it looks like." I laughed. A deep, humorless laugh that sounded foreign even to me. "Really? Because it looks like you were about to go upstairs and f*** my wife." He flinched. "John, please, let me explain." I didn't let him finish. I reached into his car and grabbed him by the collar, dragging him out onto the pavement. He stumbled, nearly falling to his knees. "Jesus, John. Stop." "Stop?" I repeated. "Stop? Like you stopped when you decided to betray the man who trusted you for 45 years? He swallowed hard. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. I stepped closer. "How long?" He hesitated. That was a mistake. I grabbed him by the shirt and slammed him against his car. "How long?" A year," he stammered. "John, I swear, I didn't mean to." "A year?" My voice echoed through the parking lot. I felt my fingers twitch. I wanted to hit him. I wanted to destroy him. But I didn't. Because suddenly, an even darker thought entered my mind. Was this the first time? I let go of his shirt, stepping back. My breathing was heavy, my chest rising and falling with barely contained rage. David rubbed his throat, coughing. "John, please, let's just talk." I shook my head. "No. No more talking." I turned and walked away, leaving him standing there like the pathetic piece of shit he was. This wasn't over. Not even close. David stood frozen, his back pressed against the side of his car. His eyes darted around like a trapped animal, looking for an escape. There was none. "John," he started, his voice weak. "Listen, I stepped forward, cutting the distance between us in an instant. "Shut the hell up." He swallowed hard. For 45 years, I had called this man my best friend. We had hunted together, worked on our cars side by side, spent countless nights drinking whiskey and laughing about life. I had trusted him with my darkest fears, my greatest joys, my family. And the whole time, he was fucking my wife. "A year," I repeated, my voice cold. "A whole goddamn year, David?" His mouth opened, but nothing came out. I grabbed him by the collar and slammed him back against the car. His breath hitched. "Tell me," I growled. "Was she the one who came to you? Or did you chase after her like the pathetic bastard you are? John, please. Answer me." His body trembled under my grip. It just happened, okay? We didn't plan it. We didn't mean for it to." I let out a bitter laugh. "Didn't mean for it? You accidentally tripped and landed inside my wife?" He flinched. "It started slow. She told me she was lonely. That you weren't paying attention to her anymore. One night, after a few drinks, she kissed me. I tried to stop it, I swear. I slammed him against the car again. Try harder. Tears welled up in his eyes. It made me sick. Did you love her? I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. He hesitated. That second of hesitation told me everything I needed to know. I let go of his collar and took a step back. David gasped for air, rubbing his throat. John, please. I'll end it. I swear to God, I'll never see her again. I tilted my head. You think this is about ending it? His face paled. I leaned in close, my voice just above a whisper. I'm not here to stop it, David. His breath caught. I'm here to burn your whole fucking life to the ground. I walked away, leaving him standing there, shaking. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I got in my truck, my mind racing. The rage inside me wasn't enough. I wanted more. I wanted revenge. And I knew exactly how to get it. Step 1 was easy. I pulled out my phone and made a call. Hey, Mark. It's John. Mark was our town's best divorce attorney. Ruthless. Efficient. The kind of man who could turn a cheating spouse into a homeless wreck within weeks. John, he greeted. What can I do for you? I exhaled slowly, gripping the wheel. I need you to ruin my wife. A pause. Then, say no more. Come by my office tomorrow morning. Step 1? Done. Now, step 2. I pulled up to a small house on the other side of town. It was late, but the lights were still on. I knocked on the door. It opened, and a young woman stood there, confused. Mr. Reynolds? Hi, Jessica, I said. We need to talk. Jessica. David's daughter. Her brows furrowed. What's this about? I gave her a sad smile. Your father has been keeping secrets from you. Her face darkened. What kind of secrets? I pulled out my phone, opened the messages from Mary's phone, and handed it to her. She scrolled. Her hands started to shake. Then, a small gasp. Oh my God. Tears welled up in her eyes. My dad is cheating on Mom? I nodded slowly. She looked at me, anger flashing across her face. Does she know? Not yet. I met her gaze. Do you want to tell her? Or should I? Jessica clenched her jaw. I'll do it. I patted her shoulder. Good girl. And just like that, David's perfect family was about to come crashing down. This was just the beginning. I didn't go home that night. I couldn't. Not yet. I sat in my truck, parked outside a rundown bar on the outskirts of town, gripping the steering wheel so hard my fingers ached. My pulse was still hammering in my ears, drowning out the muffled sounds of distant traffic and the occasional honk of a passing car. David's terrified face replayed in my mind over and over. The sheer panic in his eyes when he realized I knew everything. But that wasn't enough. Not nearly enough. I had spent 50 goddamn years being a good husband. A loyal friend. A man who honored his vows and trusted the people closest to him. And what did that get me? 50 years of lies. I exhaled sharply and reached for my phone. It was time to take the next step. I dialed a number I hadn't called in years. It rang twice before a gruff voice answered. Yeah? Tom, it's John. A pause. Then, John? Holy hell, man. I haven't heard from you in years. You finally need my help with something? You still work in private security? Tom chuckled. More like private investigations now. Cheating spouses, hidden assets, that kind of thing. Why? I clenched my jaw. Because I need you to dig into my wife's past. Every detail. Every lie. Every single thing she's been hiding from me. There was a beat of silence. Then, shit. All right, John. Give me a couple of days. I'll find everything. I hung up and stared at my reflection in the review mirror. The man looking back at me was a stranger. But maybe that was a good thing. Because the man I used to be? He was dead. When I finally pulled into the driveway at dawn, Mary was already awake, standing by the kitchen window with a cup of coffee in her hands. Her eyes flicked to me as I stepped inside, and for the first time in 50 years, I saw something in them I had never seen before. Fear. Where were you? She asked, her voice too casual. Out, I said flatly, walking past her. She hesitated, then forced a nervous smile. You didn't answer my calls. I was worried. I turned to face her, studying every inch of her expression. The small crease between her brows. The way she kept shifting her weight from foot to foot. She was lying. Good. Let her wonder what I knew. Let her feel what it's like to be trapped in uncertainty, just like I had been. I had things to take care of, I said finally, my voice unreadable. She swallowed. John, is everything okay? I took a slow step closer. I don't know, Mary, I said softly. Is it? Her breath caught in her throat. And that's when I knew. She knew the walls were closing in. That evening, my phone buzzed. It was Jessica. Mr. Reynolds, she said, her voice shaking. My mom knows. I leaned back in my chair. How'd she take it? Jessica let out a humorless laugh. How do you think? She threw a lamp at him. He's staying at a hotel now. Good, I said. That's just the beginning. She hesitated. Mr. Reynolds, my mom wants to talk to you. That made me pause. Why? Because she wants you to destroy my dad. I smiled. Put her on the phone. A few seconds later, Linda Carter's voice came through the speaker. John, she said, her voice cold. How much do you want? I raised an eyebrow. Excuse me? To ruin David. To make him suffer. Whatever it costs, I'll pay it. I let out a low chuckle. Linda, sweetheart, you don't need to pay me a damn thing. I could hear the confusion in her silence. See, I continued, I'm not doing this for money. I leaned forward, lowering my voice. I'm doing it because he deserves it. Linda exhaled. Then let's do it right. Damn. I liked her already. I was sitting on the porch that night when Mary came outside, wrapping a sweater around her shoulders. John, she said hesitantly, can we talk? I didn't look at her. Talk about what? She bit her lip. You've been distant. You barely speak to me. You didn't come home last night. Is something wrong? I turned my head slowly, finally meeting her eyes. You tell me, Mary, I said quietly. Is something wrong? She froze. For the briefest moment, I saw it, pure, naked panic flashing across her face. Then she forced a laugh, shaking her head. John, you're scaring me. Good. I wanted her to be scared. Because soon? She was going to lose everything. 2 days later, I got the call I had been waiting for. John, Tom's voice came through the receiver, low and serious. You sitting down? I wasn't. I was standing in the kitchen, gripping a cup of black coffee I hadn't touched in over an hour. Just tell me. Tom sighed. You were right to be suspicious. Your wife's been lying to you for a lot longer than a year, my friend. I didn't say anything. My throat felt dry. Tom continued. I dug into her past. Bank records, phone records, emails, everything. And I found something. Or rather, someone. I clenched my jaw. Who? Tom hesitated. His name's Eric Dawson. Mean anything to you? My stomach dropped. Eric Dawson. I hadn't heard that name in over 30 years. He was a guy from our town, the type who always had a silver tongue and a hand in someone else's pocket. When we were younger, Mary dated him for a short time, before we got married. Or at least, that's what I thought. What about him? I asked, my voice quieter now. Tom exhaled. I don't know how to say this, John, but your wife's been sending him money. A lot of it. For decades. The room spun. For how long? I forced out. Since 1988, Tom said. Right after your first son was born. A cold wave of nausea washed over me. That was the year we had our first child. That was the year Mary became a mother. And that was the year she started sending money to her ex-boyfriend. I felt sick. Tom kept going. It gets worse. I found a letter. One she sent him in 1995. Want to hear what it said? I said nothing. Then Tom read it aloud. Eric, I can't thank you enough for keeping our secret all these years. John can never find out, he would never forgive me. I will keep helping you as long as I can, but we need to be careful. He cannot suspect a thing. If he does, we both lose everything. Mary. My hands shook. John, Tom said cautiously, are you still there? I swallowed hard. Yeah. Listen, man. I don't know what this means exactly, but I have a feeling you do. I'll send you all the files. I hung up. Then I sat down at the table, staring at nothing. She had been lying to me since the day we got married. This wasn't just some midlife crisis affair. This wasn't some cheap thrill with David. This was my entire goddamn life. And I had been living in a lie. I poured myself a drink, but my hands were shaking too badly to hold the glass. Money. A secret. A child. Then a thought hit me so hard, I nearly lost my breath. My son. Our firstborn son. I shot up from my chair, knocking the bottle off the table. No. No, it couldn't be. But I had to know. I had to be sure. I grabbed my keys and drove straight to my eldest son's house. When he opened the door, he looked confused. Dad? Everything okay? I studied his face. His features. His eyes. He looked nothing like me. Son, I said slowly, my voice barely steady, I need you to do something for me. He frowned. What is it? I swallowed. A DNA test. I stood there, staring at my son. Or at least, the man I thought was my son. The words sat like poison on my tongue, burning their way through my mind. A DNA test. He frowned, his expression shifting from concern to confusion. Dad, what the hell are you talking about? I swallowed, my throat dry as sandpaper. I just need to be sure. His confusion turned to offense. Be sure of what? I couldn't say it. Not yet. I forced a breath, trying to steady myself. I can't explain it right now. But I need you to trust me. He hesitated. Does this have something to do with Mom? My silence was all the answer he needed. His jaw tightened, his eyes searching mine. You think she, he exhaled sharply, shaking his head. Jesus, Dad. Do you really think she would do something like that? I let out a bitter laugh. I don't think, son. I know. His face paled. I pulled a DNA test kit from my jacket and placed it on the table. If I'm wrong, then I'll never bring this up again. But if I'm right... My voice trailed off, because I didn't know how to finish that sentence. Because if I was right, then my entire life was a joke. He stared at the kit for a long moment. Then, without a word, he picked it up and walked to the bathroom. I sat down, rubbing my hands over my face. Minutes felt like hours. Then he came back, set the swab down, and exhaled. Now what? I took the test, my voice cold. Now, we wait. The results came back 3 days later. I sat alone in my truck, parked at the edge of an empty lot, gripping the envelope so tightly my fingers ached. I had been preparing for this moment. Telling myself that I was ready for whatever truth lay inside. I wasn't. My hands trembled as I tore it open and unfolded the paper. My eyes scanned the results. Probability of paternity is 0%. 0. Everything inside me went numb. No rage. No grief. Just nothing. I closed my eyes, breathing deeply, trying to process. He wasn't my son. The boy I had raised. The man I had called my firstborn. He was never mine. I leaned my head back against the seat and let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Then, slowly, the numbness cracked. And something darker took its place. She lied to me. For 35 years. And she thought she would get away with it? No. She was about to learn what it meant to betray a man like me. I went home that night, my movements slow, controlled. Mary had no idea that I knew the truth. She was in the kitchen, humming softly, a glass of wine in her hand. Acting like she was still my loving wife. Like she hadn't built our entire life on a lie. I stood in the doorway, watching her, my blood ice cold. She noticed me and smiled. Hey, honey. You home late? I forced a smile. Yeah. Busy day. She set her wine down and walked toward me. I made your favorite for dinner. I almost laughed. She had no idea. I let her kiss my cheek. Let her play the role for a little longer. Because the moment she let her guard down, I was going to destroy her. Mary had no idea. She had no idea that the life she built on lies was seconds away from crumbling. She had no idea that I knew the truth. That I had held the DNA results in my shaking hands just hours ago, confirming that my firstborn son wasn't mine. And she sure as hell had no idea what was coming next. I stood in the doorway of our bedroom that night, watching her as she brushed her hair in front of the mirror. The same mirror she had used for decades. The same mirror she had probably stared into before sneaking off to fuck other men behind my back. I should have felt rage. I should have wanted to scream at her, to tear the house apart, to let my fury consume me. But I didn't. Because rage burns fast and fades. What I wanted wasn't a single explosion of anger. What I wanted was her entire world to collapse, slowly, painfully, and permanently. And that's exactly what I was going to do. The next morning, I played my role perfectly. I sat at the breakfast table, drinking my coffee as if everything was fine. As if my entire existence hadn't just been shattered. Mary hummed to herself while making toast, acting like the same loving wife she had always pretended to be. Then she sat down across from me and smiled. You seem quiet, honey. Something on your mind? I took a slow sip of coffee, watching her carefully. I wanted to say, yeah, something's on my mind, Mary. Like how I wasted 50 years of my life on a lying whore. But instead, I smiled back. I was just thinking, I said, my voice calm. Maybe we should have a little family dinner this weekend. You know, invite the kids over. Just the family. No one else. Her smile widened. That sounds lovely. Lovely. She had no idea she had just agreed to her own execution. The night of the dinner, I set everything up perfectly. The dining table was beautifully arranged, fine china, crystal glasses, candles. It looked like a celebration. And in a way, it was. Because tonight? Mary was going to lose everything. She had spent decades lying to me. Decades playing house with a man she never truly loved. And now, she was about to pay the price. One by one, our children arrived. First, our youngest son. Then our daughter. Then, him. The man I had raised as my own, who had called me Dad for 35 years. He smiled as he stepped inside, hugging Mary before turning to me. Hey, Dad. The word hit me like a bullet to the chest. But I kept my expression calm. I gestured toward the table. Let's eat. Dinner started normally. Laughter. Stories. The illusion of a perfect family. Mary was glowing, thinking she had brought us all together. Then, halfway through the meal, I set my fork down. Silence fell. I cleared my throat. Before we continue, I just wanted to share something with all of you. Everyone turned to me, curious. Mary smiled. Oh. What is it, dear? I reached into my pocket and pulled out the DNA test results. I placed them on the table, slowly sliding them toward the man I had spent my life believing was my son. Read it, I said. He frowned, confused, before picking up the paper. His eyes moved across the words. Then his face drained of color. Mary's smile froze. John, what is this? I looked her dead in the eyes. Why don't you tell them, Mary? Her hands shook as she reached for the paper, her eyes scanning the results. Her lips parted, but no words came out. Our daughter frowned. Mom? What's going on? Silence. Then, my firstborn, or rather, the man I had thought was my firstborn, spoke. Dad, is this real? I didn't take my eyes off Mary. I don't know, son. Why don't you ask your mother? Tears welled in his eyes. Mom? Mary's face crumpled. I can explain. Explain? Our daughter's voice was sharp. Are you saying it's true? More silence. Then, Mary broke. She buried her face in her hands and sobbed. That was all the confirmation we needed. Our youngest son pushed his chair back, disgust twisting his face. Holy shit, Mom. Our daughter just shook her head. You lied to all of us. But the worst reaction came from him. The man who had just learned that his entire existence was built on a lie. He stood up slowly, his entire body shaking. Who is my father? Mary didn't answer. He slammed his hands on the table. Who is my real father, Mom? Mary's shoulders shook violently. Then, in a voice so small I almost didn't hear it, she whispered a name. Eric Dawson. The room went dead silent. Then, my son, no, not my son, not anymore, shoved his chair back so violently it tipped over. He stormed toward the door, his breathing ragged. I can't fucking do this right now. Then he was gone. Our daughter followed, then our youngest. Leaving just me and Mary. She was sobbing into her hands, her shoulders shaking violently. I stood up, calm, emotionless. I walked over, leaned down, and whispered into her ear. That was just the beginning. Then I walked away, leaving her in the ruins of her perfect little lie. Mary didn't come to bed that night. I found her hours later, curled up on the couch, a bottle of wine half empty beside her, her face buried in her hands. She had spent the last few hours doing what she always did best, crying, playing the victim, pretending she was the one who had been wronged. I didn't feel a damn thing for her anymore. No anger. No sadness. Just cold satisfaction. I stood in the doorway, watching her shake, waiting for her to notice me. And when she finally looked up, her eyes swollen and red, her voice came out weak. "John." I tilted my head. "Something wrong, Mary?" She let out a choked sob, wiping at her face. "Please, we need to talk." I slowly walked over, took a seat in the armchair across from her, and leaned back. "Go ahead. Talk." She hesitated. Because for the first time in 50 years, she had no control over me anymore. She swallowed hard. "I never wanted to hurt you." I laughed. Actually laughed. She flinched. "Mary," I said, my voice smooth, deadly, "you lied to me for 35 years. You slept with my best friend. You let me raise another man's son, pretending he was mine. And now you're sitting here, drunk and miserable, trying to tell me you never wanted to hurt me?" She buried her face in her hands again. I was scared. "Scared?" I repeated. "Of what, Mary?" "That I'd find out you were a lying, cheating whore." She broke down completely, shoulders shaking, sobs wrecking her body. I let her cry. I wanted her to cry. Because soon? She wouldn't even have the luxury of doing it in this house. The next morning, I made my move. She was still asleep when I went to meet my lawyer. Mark greeted me with a firm handshake and a knowing smirk. "So, you ready to end this?" "Not just end it," I said. "I want to leave her with nothing." Mark nodded. "Good. Because I have something that's going to make this even worse for her." I raised an eyebrow. "Worse how?" Mark leaned back in his chair, sliding a folder across the desk. "Turns out, Mary's been committing financial fraud for years. Hidden accounts. Money funneled to Eric Dawson under fake charity donations. And guess what? That's illegal." I flipped through the documents, my smirk growing. "Oh, Mary," I muttered. "You really were stupid, weren't you?" Mark chuckled. "Divorcing her is one thing. But if we use this? We can make sure she loses everything, her reputation, her finances, her freedom." I exhaled slowly. "Do it," I said. "With pleasure." By the time I got home, Mary was awake, sitting at the kitchen table, staring at her wedding ring. She looked up at me, hope flashing across her face. "John, please, can we fix this?" I dropped a stack of divorce papers in front of her. Her entire body went stiff. What is this?" I smiled. "It's your ticket to freedom, Mary. Isn't that what you always wanted?" Her hands shook as she picked up the papers. Her eyes scanned the terms. Then her face went white. "John." Her voice cracked. "I get nothing?" I sat down across from her. "You didn't think you were walking away with half, did you?" Her mouth opened and closed, panic setting in. "But, we built this life together." I leaned forward, my voice dropping to a deadly whisper. "No, Mary. I built this life. You just fucked other men in it." Tears spilled down her face. "John, please. I have nothing without you." I smiled. "That's the idea." And then, just for good measure, I pulled out the final nail in her coffin. "Oh, and by the way," I said, tossing the fraud documents onto the table, "I hope you enjoy prison." Her face crumbled. And in that moment, for the first time ever, Mary truly understood what it felt like to lose. Mary sat there, frozen, staring at the divorce papers and the fraud charges in front of her. Her hands trembled as she picked up the documents, her eyes scanning the words like she could somehow will them into saying something different. Then, finally, she broke. Her face twisted in desperation. "John, please. I made mistakes, I know that. But we built a life together." I leaned back in my chair, completely calm. "No, Mary. I built a life. You just ed other men in it." She gasped, her breath hitching in her throat. Good. I wanted her to feel this pain. I wanted her to know what betrayal really felt like. She reached for my hand, but I pulled away before she could touch me. "John, Stop." My voice was ice. "I don't want to hear another goddamn lie from your mouth." Her lips quivered. "You don't have to do this," she whispered. I chuckled. "Do what, Mary? Expose you for what you really are? A liar? A cheater? A fraud?" She shook her head violently. "You're destroying me." I smiled. "No, Mary. You destroyed yourself. I'm just making sure everyone sees it." Her tears came faster. I stood up, taking my phone out of my pocket. "You might want to pack your things, Mary. Because by this time tomorrow, you won't be living here anymore." Her sobs turned hysterical. "Where am I supposed to go?" I tilted my head. "Maybe you can ask David." She flinched at his name. I smirked. "Oh, that's right. You can't. Because his wife left him. His kids hate him. And he's broke." Mary's breath caught. "What?" I leaned in, lowering my voice. "Did you really think I would only destroy you?" "No, sweetheart. I ruined him too." Her hands flew to her mouth, a strangled sob escaping her lips. You did this to him?" I laughed. "No, Mary. You did this. I just made sure he paid for it." She shook her head, disbelief written all over her face. "John, how did you?" I unlocked my phone and turned the screen toward her. Her eyes widened as she saw the video playing. A recording. Of her. With David. Every touch. Every whisper. Every disgusting little moment between them. Captured. Her face lost all color. "Oh my God." I grinned. "That's right, Mary. I had you followed. I had cameras set up. I have everything." She started hyperventilating, her chest rising and falling rapidly. "John, please. Please tell me you didn't show anyone?" I raised an eyebrow. "Who do you think sent it to David's wife?" Her whole body shook violently. Tears streamed down her face, her breathing uneven. "You ruined me." I leaned closer, looking her dead in the eyes. "No, Mary. I erased you." The next morning, she was gone. Her things? Packed in trash bags. Her car? Towed off the property. Her bank accounts? Frozen. Her reputation? Shattered. And just when she thought it couldn't get worse? She got a call. A lawyer. Telling her that she was under investigation for fraud. I could only imagine the look on her face when she realized she wasn't just losing her husband, her money, and her home. She was losing her freedom too. A week later, I got a text from my eldest son. "I don't know how to process any of this. But I know one thing, I still consider you my dad. And I always will." I stared at the screen, my throat tightening. Then I typed back. "You'll always be my son. Maybe not by blood. But in every other way that mattered." Months passed. Mary tried to reach out. I ignored her. She had nothing left. No family. No friends. No money. The last I heard, she was living in a rundown apartment, struggling to survive. The woman who had spent her life pretending to be perfect. Now reduced to nothing. And I didn't feel a damn thing for her. Because Mary had been right about one thing. I did destroy her. And I enjoyed every second of it.